I am really excited to see the girls from Salamagachi and also to see some of our friends from Kenya and a couple Americans that are here as well. With no further ado, I want to introduce you to Ellen Wang, who is an incredible young player. She's only 13 years old, but she's already a FIDE master, and she's also a member of the Unruly Queens, which is this great organization that goes and teaches chess to girls in America. And even before we started this program, Ellen was already teaching a chess school in Kenya, Salamagachi. So she helped bring them in to our program. So Ellen, very grateful that you were able to teach this morning. And I'll let you explain what you want to talk about today.
Yeah, so thank you. As Jennifer said, I've been playing chess for many years. I'm also a women's FIDE master, and I'm very excited that all of you guys have the opportunity to learn chess and play, because I think that not only does it teach you many life skills, and just chess is just very fun. Also, you get to meet lots of friends, and for example, like we're all gathered here on the Zoom call despite the pandemic, but you guys all get to meet each other. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that I think is present in games of all levels, ranging from beginner to even the professional level, and that is sacrificing. So usually sacrificing is when one side gives up some material, whether it's a pawn, a piece, sometimes even a queen, just to get some other type of advantage that they believe overrules that material loss. So for example, we're going to see some of two of my games where I sacrificed. In one, it was a pawn, and another one, it was an exchange. So many of you have probably played lots of sacrifices in your games to get a positional advantage, or to checkmate, or just to attack the king. So the first game that I'm showing is a game that I played in the World Cadets Chess Championships in 2017, which was held in Brazil. Not the capital, but in a very small city, kind of. And I remember our hotel was at the very, very top of a hill. So every day to get to the tournament hall, we would have to like walk all the way down and then walk all the way back up. So it was a very interesting tournament. But it was a really great tournament for me because at the end, I ended up winning the bronze medal, and it was my first like very big win in an international tournament. So this is one of the crucial games that I played. As you can see in the writing, it says this game was played in the World Cadets Chess Championships 2017, which was held in Poucas de Caldas, Brazil. This was a very crucial game for me because I was in second place, half a point behind the leader, who was my opponent. And if I won, it would put me in a great position for the second half of the tournament. So I knew coming into this game, I want to play my best, and I want to, take chances, because a draw is not very good for me. Otherwise, I'll never have a chance to take down the leader anymore, and that just won't be in my hands. So it was a very typical opening, the Sicilian defense, which starts with e4, c5. And my opponent played this move, knight f3, which is the most common move, trying to go into an open Sicilian with d4. So I think Jennifer has a poll for what you would do as black here. There are many different moves. So we'll give everyone a second to submit their answer. And remember, there's no wrong answer, so don't be afraid to submit any of these options. So it looks like there's 4 moves that are actually like quite close, very close.
Great, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, does anybody want to unmute themselves and say what they would play? Catherine, do you want to tell us what you would play? There's 2, so it's funny, there's Catherine is the name of the person who logged in from Salamagachi, and we also have a Catherine in the class. But Catherine, do you want to tell us what you would play?
Knight c6.
Okay, so knight c6 is a very common move, and all of these moves, I think, are opening theory. So the move knight c6 usually leads to, we're not going to go too in depth because that's not the point of the lesson, but usually it leads to some accelerated dragons like this. or some Rosalimos with bishop b5. So it's definitely a very interesting option. I've played it as both white and black. This isn't what happened in the game, but yes, if you play this move, good job. It's a really good opening.
Knight f6.
Okay, so knight f6. This is also, I think, a pretty good move, obviously, attacking the pawn on e4. I'm not really sure what the main line here is because I haven't really looked into this too much, but probably e5 makes sense, and then knight d5.
This is like a little bit more offbeat, but it's not bad for black. It's just more unusual than the others. It's called the Nimzovich.
Yeah, it's probably a very good weapon if you're playing against an opponent who doesn't know it, and if you know it quite well, then it'll put you in a good position for the middle game. So here I played the move e6. This usually leads to some Sicilian Khan or Taimanov after d4. So I've played this for many, many years, probably like 3 or 4 years. It's been kind of a pet line of mine. So after c takes d4, knight takes d4, we reach the critical position after the center opens up. So usually there's 2 moves, knight c6 or a6, which is what I played. Knight c6 goes into the Taimanov, but we're not going to go really in depth. So a6, bishop d3, just very typical developing moves. Bishop c5, attacking the knight, knight b3, and then I move my bishop back to e7. Castles and queen c7, trying to stop white's e5 move, which would, control the d6 and f6 squares, and my knight wants to go to f6. So we really don't want white to be able to play e5. So my opponent played queen g4, attacking the g7 pawn, and I played the move g6, defending it. So here you can see that there are lots of dark squares that are weak, because obviously all of black's pawns are on light squares, which means they cannot control the dark squares. So I didn't think this was a very big problem because black will eventually play d6 and knight f6. And one thing that made me feel more confident is that after white moved the queen to g4, black will eventually get a tempo against the queen by playing knight f6 and obviously attacking the queen, which would have to move away at some point. So after g6, my opponent played queen e2, anticipating that I would play knight f6, and I played knight c6, once again trying to control this e5 square. And then my opponent played f4, trying to play e5 again. And I played knight f6. I think this was probably a slight inaccuracy because my opponent could have played e5, and then I would be forced to play knight d5 because I don't want to move my knight back to g8. And then she could have played c4 and attacked my knight in so many different ways that I would lose just so much time, and she would finally get this clamp on the dark squares. So my opponent didn't play that, fortunately for me. She played the move c4, which is trying to control the center even more. And this is usually, we call it a Maroczy bind. So I was pretty confident now because I got to play d6 and control e5. So after bishop d2 and castles, we reach a position where both sides have developed most of their pieces. My opponent still has to develop the knight on b1 and try to get the rooks into the game. But she tried to play a breakthrough move, which was very reasonable, but I think made the position pretty unbalanced and very complicated. So she played the move f5. So what she was trying to do, as I said, was unbalance the position and try to open it up, because in the open Sicilian, usually white is the one that tries to attack, and black is usually very solid and wants to just maneuver around. But I think she tried to force things too quickly, because one key idea in the opening is to develop your pieces. And you see that her knight and rook are still on their starting squares, which means that they aren't in a good position to start attacking. And I think that my position is adequately defended, because even though my bishop is not currently developed, it's still, defending this f5 square indirectly. So here, I played a move which wasn't the best move objectively, as I checked with the computer later on, but I think it gave me very good chances, especially in the tournament situation that I was in. So I played d5. d5, as you can see, there are so many different pawns, having contact with each other. These two. To be honest, I did not calculate every single line during the game because that would just confuse me. But I felt confident that, because my opponent doesn't have the knight developed yet, this should work for me. So after d5, there are so many different captures that white has to choose from. And my opponent played the move c takes d5, very reasonable, trading a pair of pawns. And then she took on g6. After f takes g6, and she played e takes d5, trying to take a pawn. So here, I had a decision to make. I could either take this pawn on d5, or I could play the move that I played in the game. So after knight takes d5, I think that this is probably what my opponent wanted, because she could pin my knight on d5, and I would be forced to defend it in a way such as like queen d7 and then knight c3. And she just has so much pressure against this knight on d5, and I will probably lose a piece at some point. So instead of that, I played a move that is starting to gain initiative. And this was my whole point. I wanted to sacrifice this pawn on d5. As you can see, she took it. And now I played the move knight to g4, which is attacking h2 with checkmate threatened. And all my pieces are just attacking. You can see this bishop is ready to go to d6, possibly attacking h2. This bishop is beautifully defending this knight, which is putting more pressure on h2, and also my rook is on the open file. So this is kind of the exact thing that you want, all of your pieces to be coordinating well. And in chess, we call it harmony, which is when, in music, harmony is when one note kind of complements a more melodic note. So here, all my pieces are complementing each other, and they're all working in unison.
You're also a musician, Ellen, aren't you?
Yeah, I've played piano for many years, and I also started playing flute a couple years ago. So this is kind of, where my music side comes out. Yeah, so in this position, all of my pieces are working in unison, as I said. So here my opponent was starting to panic, and I could sense it because, when your opponent starts to get nervous, you can see them kind of starting to sweat a little bit. And so after knight g4, she took my rook on f8, which I think was the best move because it's trading off one of my attackers, which could have put even more pressure on her king. And this is check right now, so I cannot play queen takes h2 with queen h1 mate since I have to defend my king first. So I played bishop takes f8 because I didn't want to put my king on the open f file. And after bishop takes f8, she played g3, which was forced because there was no other way to defend the h2 threat. So here I played knight to e5, bringing in another one of my pieces. Now my knight is defending this knight on g4 in case my bishop ever wants to come out, and also attacking the bishop on d3. So after knight e5, my opponent played bishop to c3. So now I think there is a poll for what would you play as black in this position?
I'll played my bishop to d6.
Okay, bishop to d6. I think that wasn't one of the poll options, but that's also a pretty good move. So I'm going to show what I played in this position. And in order to find this move, as Jennifer said, you want to look for forcing moves first. So that includes checks first, then captures, and then threats. So my move is a check. And I think that when Liliana, I think it was, wanted to play queen b6. And this is very similar to the move that I played, which was bishop to c5 check. So the difference between these two moves is that after queen to b6, I think white has the option of going bishop to d4 and attacking the queen. So the reason that white doesn't have this option, after bishop to c5 is that after bishop to d4, black can take the bishop, and after knight takes, I think queen c5 is going to win a piece because the only way for white to defend this knight is to play queen e4, and then bishop to f5 is a pretty nice move, skewering the queen and the bishop, and the queen is also attacking the knight at the same time. And of course, this knight cannot take this bishop because the knight is pinned to the king. So that is why I think bishop to c5 is better than queen b6, but it's very good that you looked at the checking moves first. So after bishop to c5, you might be wondering, well, why is this move so good? And the reason is because obviously we're attacking the king, and now my knights can go into the squares such as e3 and f2, which are getting even closer to the king with the help of the bishop defending those squares. So my opponent played knight takes c5. Oh, she actually played king g2, my bad. So knight takes c5 I think is one option as well, because it's trading off a bishop for a knight that's on the other side of the board. And this is probably also very similar to what happened in the game, as we'll see later on, just all my pieces coming towards the king. So
excuse me, I have a question.
Yes, what's your question?
And what if bishop plays c5 and then white knight picks c5?
So is your question that after bishop c5, if knight goes knight to d4?
I think she said knight
No.
c5. I think she said knight c5. Is that right, Devlin?
Knight picks bishop.
Knight takes
Yes,
bishop.
knight
Yeah.
takes bishop. Okay,
Yeah.
so after knight takes bishop, black will take back with the queen, and this is once again a check. So we looked at the line after king to g2 and knight e3 check, and this is very similar to what happened in the game, as you'll see later on. So my opponent after bishop c5 check played king to g2. And here I played knight e3. As we saw in the line after knight takes c5, knight e3 is something that we want to do to bring our knight closer to the king and attack it. So my opponent played king to h1, and now I played bishop g4, bringing in the final two pieces, the bishop and the rook, into attack. So after bishop g4, I am attacking my opponent's queen. So she played the move bishop takes e5. So this is a good move, I think, trying to take another one of the attackers. And the reason I cannot take white's queen here is because she will take my queen. And right now, I'm the one that's attacking, so I don't want to trade lots of pieces. Otherwise, my attack won't be as strong since I don't have any pieces to carry out the final checkmate, which is my ultimate goal. So instead of taking the queen, I just took back the bishop with my queen. And now, once again, I am attacking her queen, so she wants to move the queen away. So she played queen to f2, and I played the move rook to f8, just bringing my last and final piece into the game. You can see that all of my pieces are at the king, the bishop, the knight, the other bishop, the queen, and the rook. So, and meanwhile, her knight and her rook are still on the starting squares. So after rook to f8, my opponent played queen e1, and now this is a very quick little checkmate. So if anybody wants to see how does white checkmate, how does black checkmate white in just a couple of moves?
Rook f1.
Okay, rook to f1. This is a very interesting move because, of course, it's a check and you want to look at checks first. So it's also forking the king and the queen. But I think after bishop takes f1, there probably is mate here too. After bishop f3, king g1, I think there is knight c2. So probably bishop g2, and then after bishop takes king g1, there still is knight c2 here. But yes, rook f1 is definitely a very good move. But there is a faster way to checkmate, and rook f1 is not fully necessary. So yes, Valentine, I think you have your hand raised.
I'll play bishop to f3 giving giving a check. Then he'll move to king 1. Then I take my knight and put it in c2.
Okay, yes, very nice. This is actually exactly what happened in the game. Bishop f3, we'll go back a couple of moves. So after bishop f3, king g1 is forced because there's no other square for the king to move to. And then knight c2, and my opponent resigned because she's going to lose her queen and mate is going to follow shortly after that. So I think Yamelin had a question.
Yeah, while you get the next position set up, Jalen, did you want to ask your question? The next game has a lot of really cool moments, so let's try to move through that one. Jalen, quick question.
And what if queen at d5?
Yeah, so I think your question was queen takes d5. I think this is also a very good move, checking the king. This will lead to checkmate as well because of queen g2 mate, but I think bishop f3 just kind of looks cooler because all of my pieces are at the king, and I like to do it in the most beautiful way possible. Oh, shoot, sorry. My light just fell. But
oh, no.
Yeah, queen takes d5 is also a very good move that leads to checkmate. Yeah, so very good job. You actually found another checkmate, which I hadn't thought about because the other variation also leads to checkmate. But, as Emmanuel Lasker said, when you see a good move, you want to try to look for a better one. So this time I was white, and this was actually played just last year, so more recent than the other game, in the World Cadets Championship 2019. So this was held in Weifang, China, and this was the last year that I was eligible to play in the World Cadets. So I wanted to end on a high note because I was 12 when this game happened, and the age limit is you cannot be older than 12. So in this game, I started with d4 and bishop f4. So this is a surprise opening. I had specifically prepared it against my opponent, Kelsey Leo. She's also an American chess player, and she's a pretty good friend of mine, and I'm very familiar with her opening style and also just her playing style in general. So she likes to, attack and have initiative. As you can see, she's playing kind of a King's Indian, Grunfeld type of setup. And the London is typically, as I said, a more quiet opening. And instead of, lots of tactics, usually it's a lot of maneuvering and strategical play. So so London is usually kind of characterized by this move, bishop to f4 with e3 and knight f3. So after bishop f4, my opponent played bishop g7, just fianchettoing her bishop on the long diagonal. And we played some more, typical opening moves. So c3, these are all kind of very typical London moves. Usually we have this structure, and h3 was so that if black ever plays, knight h5, then my bishop has this kind of window to go back to because I want to keep that bishop. So we get this structure, and I realized that, she hasn't castled yet. And this is something that I can't exploit right now, but I want to keep that in mind because you never know when, the position can just suddenly open up or you get one chance to exploit this weakness. Castling, I would say, happens in about probably 80% of chess games. Castling something that, it makes your king safe and also brings your rook into the game and connects your rooks. So after c3, my opponent played knight e4. So she's trying to, activate this knight on kind of this, I would say, semi-outpost. And I want to try to challenge it, so I played the move knight to d2, offering this trade of knights and seeing, if my opponent wants to trade by herself or does she want me to take on e4. So she played e6, just kind of solidifying her structure. And I played a4, which I think is also a very typical idea in these London structures where black plays g6 and b6 to try to play a5 and maybe open up the a file. So after a4, my opponent played a6. So I think the reason for this is that if I play a5 now, she'll always have this option of playing b5, and then at some point maybe playing c5. So you can see that a lot of the plays on the queen side, because on the king side, both sides are pretty solid, and you don't want to really extend your pawns too far on the king side because it's most common to castle there. So I did not play a5. I played the move queen to c2, applying more pressure on this knight on e4, so that at some point I want to take it. So after queen to c2, she played the move h6. I don't know what the point of this move really was. I think it was so that after, for example, if she hadn't played h6, let's say she played a move like a5, I think the reason she played h6 is so that if I took here, she didn't want me to have this move knight to g5, which is attacking the pawn on e4, and also maybe at some point, the f7, h7, and e6 pawns could become weak. So I think that was the point of h6, but I think she should have just taken on d2 because I don't think, as you'll see in the game, I don't think allowing me to double her pawns was a good idea. So after queen c2 h6, I took on e4 and she took back with the pawn. And now this pawn, as you can see, is kind of isolated from the rest of her pawns. It's on the 4th rank for her, which would be the 5th rank, and it's very far extended forward. So I played the move knight to d2, attacking this pawn, and she played f5, which I think was forced at this point since she had almost no other way to defend this pawn on e4. She could have played knight f6, but then I think bishop e5, and I'm going to trade off this knight and take the pawn on e4, which would not be good for her because obviously you don't want to lose a pawn for nothing. Obviously, our theme is sacrificing, so she could have tried to find a way to sacrifice this pawn and find some compensation for it, but I don't think there was any way in this position. So she played the move f5 to defend the pawn. And one thing to notice is that all of her kingside pawns are kind of pushed forward from their starting squares. And right now she isn't castled on the king side, but if she ever does, I think the squares will just be too weak and I'll have ideas such as f3 and g4, just opening up the king side. So she did not ever castle in this game, but after f5, I played the move f3, just immediately trying to undermine this pawn on e4 because, it is kind of in like my space and it could kind of be like choking me in some way, kind of restricting my pieces. So f3, and she played knight to f6, defending the pawn on e4 once again. And I played f takes e4, and she played knight takes e4. So this is kind of when I got the idea of a sacrifice I was going to play. I think there's a poll for what would you do in this position. There are many good moves. My move by the engine, I don't think it was the top move, but it gives white a very interesting chance. So the options are bishop d3, knight takes e4, bishop f3, knight c4, and bishop e5.
Yeah, and if you have any problem answering the poll, you can feel free to write your answer in chat. Catherine, did you want to say what you were going to play? Oh, okay. I thought you were raising your hand. All right. That's okay. You can explain what you did, Ellen, because I think it's pretty deep. And 3 people played what you want to play.
Yeah. So I think that kind of shows like the level of this class. Like you guys are all very, very good chess players. So I played the move bishop f3. You can see that there is this knight being pinned to the bishop on b7, but there's kind of a deeper idea behind it. Because my opponent played knight takes d2. And here I have 2 options. I can either take on b7 or I can just take the knight on d2 back. And I went for kind of the more risky one. Taking on d2, my opponent would probably just take back on f3, and then I would probably play rook takes. This is kind of, I think white is better because of these overextended pawns, but It's kind of more or less a kind of normal position. Black will probably at some point play, queen d5, maybe castle on the queen side, and try to, just bring the rooks out. So I played bishop takes b7, and my opponent played knight takes f1, trying just, take the rook. And here I also had another option. I could either take the rook on a8, go bishop c6, or take the knight on f1. I think there was a poll here, was there? Or if
there is one here. Yeah, I'm putting it here. So what would you do after king f7? Is that, wait, no, after
knight takes f1. If there isn't a poll here, it's okay because we can.
No. I have it after bishop c6 check.
Okay, so
yeah.
So
you're throwing this great in between move, which is it's not such an important chess tactic.
In between moves are probably also, they're a very good resource for both sides. We'll see I think in the next move, my opponent also had the resource of an in-between move. So after bishop to c6 check, black is forced to give up castling rights because there is nothing to capture. So in chess, there's 3 ways to get out of check. There's either you can run away with your king, you can block the check, or you can capture the piece that is checking. Here there is nothing to capture this bishop on c6, and the only way to block the check is queen to d7, which we obviously don't want to do because it gives away the queen. So my opponent had to move the king away, which gives up castling rights since in chess you cannot castle after the king has been moved. So she played king to f7. And here I think is where the poll is. So would you take the rook on f8, on a8, sorry, or would you take the knight on f1?
So we'll give you guys a minute for this. What will you do?
This is a very critical moment, I think, because it kind of determined the style of the rest of the game, sort of.
Yeah, this is such a great game, Ellen. I really enjoyed this game.
Yeah, and when you play games like this, you just feel really proud because you're like, everything that I've done, I finally get to, execute it at some point. Because I've seen so many great sacrifices, like not in my games, but in, the top players' games. And when you finally get to play one, you're like, you know what? After I saw all those examples, I finally get to use it.
That's right. Well, good job. We've got 3 people who played the move that you played. You want to show them what you did? I'll share the result.
So here, I think the main options are bishop takes a8 and rook takes f1, and king takes f1 is also possible. So if I had played bishop takes a8, I think my opponent would have had the in-between move knight takes e3. So we can see that before knight takes e3, both sides have pieces under attack. If you count the material right now, both sides have 2 minor pieces, a rook and a queen, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. So right now the material is equal. So if black takes the bishop on a8, white would take the knight on f1, and the material would stay balanced. If my opponent plays this move knight takes e3 first, she takes a pawn, and if I take the knight on e3, then she will take the bishop on a8. And now if you count the material, both sides have a bishop, a rook, and a queen, but now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns, and she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. So not only does bishop takes a8 lose a pawn, even though I think white is still doing fine in this position, my move, I think, just gave a chance that would, it's a one-time chance. Like, you cannot get this anymore after this moment. So I played the move rook takes f1, sacrificing an exchange. Because if you count the material now, we both have a queen, we both have 7 pawns, but she has 2 rooks. So we both have a dark square bishop, but she has 2 rooks, and I have a rook and a bishop. So I am down in exchange. When we say that one side has a knight and the other side has a rook, or one side has a bishop and the other side has a rook, we call that an exchange. So I sacrificed an exchange just so that I would get her king out of the game, out of castling rights, and also now I have these ideas of attacking the king. So you can see in my notes here, it says, Black has lost castling rights, the bishop on c6 is hard to eject, and I have ideas with e4 and g4 blasting open the center. So I felt really confident at this moment since, my opponent doesn't have any of her major pieces really doing anything. And I think that these are the types of positions where it's just easier for one side to play. Whenever, I think it's easier to attack than defend because, when you're defending, you have to constantly check all these threats and see if any of them work for your opponent. But when you're attacking, there's just this momentum that gives you strength and kind of makes you more riled up. So after rook takes f1, my opponent played rook to a7. And I think this was a mistake because her rook is kind of stuck here now. And I had talked to her, so there's a poll saying, what would you do after rook a7? So while you guys are thinking about that, I can kind of tell you what my opponent was thinking on her part. Because I mentioned earlier that I'm pretty good friends with Kelsey. And I talked to her after the game and she said, when I played rook a7, I was thinking that at some point I would be able to, attack this bishop, make it leave, and then play, push my pawn so that the rook could come in via the 7th rank. And this is a very good idea, but the problem is, kind of surprisingly, this bishop on c6 is very hard to attack. Obviously, you would think, oh, my queen can attack it, but the d6 square is currently covered by the dark square bishop. So the poll is, what would you do after rook a7? And there are 5 options. So e4, a5, g4, d5, or rook d1.
This one's really thematic. What you want to think about is that king on f7 is potentially vulnerable, but how do you open the position to take advantage of that? It's a really thematic type of question. Let's see if anybody wants to tell us what they would do, either in chat or by unmuting yourself. How about the girls from Salamagachi? Anybody have an idea here?
I think e4.
So e4 is in fact the correct answer. Very good job. So as Jennifer said, this is a very thematic idea. When your opponent or yourself has a king stuck in the center, you want to try to open the center as quick as possible so that you can have the open files and diagonals to bring your pieces in and attack. So I played e4 in this position. So e4, it's creating this tension between these two pawns. And if either black or white takes the other pawn at some point, you'll see that this f file is becoming open. And my rook on f1 will be very happy about that. So I played e4, trying to open the center. And my opponent played king g8, trying to bring her king to safety on h7 and then bring the rook in. She's kind of doing manual castling, which happens a lot when one side's forced to give up castling rights. You kind of just castle by hand, and it takes more moves, but it's usually worth it in the end. So I knew I have to act fast here. So I played the move queen to b3, attacking this e6 pawn. And she doesn't want to give it up because this e6 pawn is kind of what's holding the f5 pawn together, this g6 and e6 pawn. And if I would have been able to take the pawn on e6, then my queen is obviously super active and the pawn on f5 would likely fall as well. So she defended this e6 pawn with the move queen to e7, very reasonable. And now I want to try to attack the e6 pawn one more time. So I played e takes f5, opening the e file. After g takes f5, I put my rook on that half open e file, putting even more pressure on this e6 pawn. So I think she could have defended this pawn with king f7, but then I would have played the move d5, trying to open the center even more. And now, my threat is rook takes e6 or pawn takes e6, and I think that this would have just been too much to handle. So she didn't defend the pawn on e6. She played king h7, just trying to carry out her plan of hand castling, and I played rook takes e6. And now she played queen h4. So now this is kind of the tactic that made this sacrifice it like justified the sacrifice, even though there was positional compensation before. So there's a poll saying, what would you do after queen h4? Bishop e5, bishop takes h6, rook takes h6, or bishop e8?
Excellent. We'll give you guys another 15 seconds, and somebody want to be brave and unmute themselves and tell us what you did. Well, a lot of you who voted got it right, so don't be too shy. Who wants to unmute themselves?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, Anne, hello. Good to see you.
Hi, you too. Sorry, I left the meeting. Guys are quiet today.
So what would you play here?
For me, the best move would be the sacrifice rook times h6 check.
Mm-hmm. And then
if they want to respond with bishop times h6, then you can move queen to f7 check. Yes, I think the bishop will, when the bishop blocks, then bishop to e5, pinning the bishop, threatening a mate.
Yes, very nice. I think this is a key variation. Although one one improvement after bishop e5, I think this I'm not really sure what the evaluation here is, but it looks really good for white because of this pin. Black will probably defend the bishop with queen g5, and then maybe white can proceed with like bishop d7, trying to attack his pawn on f5 again. So instead of bishop e5, there is a direct, I think, a two-move checkmate here, which is queen takes f5, and then after king g8, which is forced, then bishop d5, which is checkmate. So but your line was very good too. It's very good that you're trying to think about, how do I attack the pinned piece, because pinned piece cannot move out of the square. So yes, I put the move rook takes h6, which is a sacrifice again. Even though she cannot accept it, the only other move is queen takes h6, giving up the queen, and then I went on to win the game quite easily after that. I just won the bishop and then brought my king up to checkmate on g5.
That was absolutely fantastic game, Ellen, and you guys should, if you're interested, actually, Ellen is part of the Unruly Queens. You should maybe follow them or join their club, and you can even potentially get involved in some of their events. You can go to the website about Unruly Queens. I'll send you guys a message in the chess.com group about it. And otherwise, I think there were some people who had trouble logging in because I got a message about it. So a couple of our regulars weren't able to see the lesson. But the good news is we are going to be posting a video of it. So you will have a chance to review it if you were here. So if there were some lines you want to review, you'll have a chance to review it. And if your friends weren't here, they'll be able to see it too. So that's great. And, special shout out to our girls at Salamagachi. It was great to see them. I think they just logged off. And thank you, Ellen, for teaching and for all that you do.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity to show all these girls my games.
They were fantastic. And there were a couple she didn't get to show. So we might have like a joint session or something in the future where she shows even more of her brilliant attacking game. So, and I love the way you talked about how you see all these sacrifices in books, but it's this great pleasure to be executing it them yourself. And that's what I hope for all of you in this class.
Yeah. I'm sure if you guys keep playing, and if you enjoy chess, at some point you will get a game like this, or even just any game that you win just feels good.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Asante Sana, right? Asante Sana, Ellen. Am I saying that right? You can unmute yourself and correct me.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, thank you. Asante Sana.
Yeah, Karibu.
Karibu. And by the way, Judith's going to give you more info, but November 8th is going to be our next meeting, and we're going to be playing a blitz tournament with me, with the US girls and the Kenya girls. So that should be super fun.
Okay, wonderful.
Caribou. Caribou. Hi, everyone. Thanks again, Ellen.
Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
Bye.
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 Thanks, Catherine. Thanks,
Bye.
Valentine. Good to see you, Valentine.
Bye.
Bye, Rose. Bye, Liliana. Great job.
Bye.
Bye, Carol.